This is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're here at the 2016 Marcum MicroCap Conference in New York City, New York. With me right now is Scott Powell from VolitionRx. The symbol is VNRX. Scott, welcome to SNNLive.
Thank you, Bobby. Really appreciate you having me here this morning.
You know, I gotta say, it feels like just yesterday I saw you, actually.
I think it was about 2 weeks, but it feels like yesterday, doesn't it?
Probably. So, for our audience that may not know the VNRX story, let's start off with an overview of the company.
Sure. Thank you, Bobby. And thank you, everyone. So we're VolitionRx, ticker VNRX. What we're doing is developing blood tests to screen for different cancers. Our lead product will be a blood test for colorectal cancer that we plan to launch in Europe this year, and we hope to launch in the US next year. Our second product will likely be a blood test for pancreatic cancer, which we hope to launch in Europe next year, and in the US either late next year or in early 2018.
So, okay, all right, let's unpack that a little bit. I want to start off with the technology itself. You know, what about your tests are different than what's currently out there?
So there are several advantages to our test. One, we're blood-based. So in general, people comply with blood-based testing. People are comfortable giving blood. Most people give blood annually for their annual physical. So it's a very good platform, and people tend to comply with blood tests. People don't comply with other screening. Think more invasive screens like a colonoscopy or other invasive screens like an endoscopic ultrasound for pancreatic cancer. There's compliance issues with some screens like that. With blood-based testing, compliance is quite high. Usually 85-90% of people will comply with a blood test. Secondly, our test is showing that we're able to pick up early-stage cancer. We've completed several clinical trials in lung, pancreatic, and colorectal, and in each of those trials, we are picking up early-stage cancer as well as late-stage.
How early?
As early as stage 1 in colorectal, and we're even picking up a lot of precancerous polyps. In a recently completed clinical trial, a 430-patient trial that we completed in March of this year, there were 181 patients with precancerous polyps. We detected 75% of those, which is extremely high. So if you can detect and identify patients with precancerous polyps, and if you remove all of those polyps, the patient virtually has no chance of developing colorectal cancer. A lot of screens out there are very good at detecting cancer late stage, but that's not where you want to be. Survivability diminishes significantly as cancer progresses to stage 3 and stage 4. For instance, in colorectal cancer, if it's caught in stage 1, you have a 90% chance of living more than 5 years. But if colorectal cancer is caught in stage 4, you only have a 12% chance of living more than 5 years. So our test is blood-based. People comply with it. We are also cost effective. Our cost of goods is about $8 a blood test. So we can price in Europe at $30, $40, $50. In the US it may be $100 or more. It's something that the general public could use because of the price point. It's something that we expect will be reimbursed in the US and in Europe, again because of the price point. And we're proving to be very accurate. In our most recently completed clinical trial, we detected over 90% of colorectal cancers. So we're really excited about our technology. We're looking to commercialize this year in Europe and next year in the US. So it should be a very interesting 12 months for us.
So what I want to know is how can you do it so inexpensive? I mean, you know, what are some of the challenges the company faces in that regard?
One of the reasons we can do it so inexpensively is because our technology runs on, we're using cutting-edge technology using old equipment. So we use ELISA-based equipment, which was developed in the 70s, and it's what most common blood tests are run on. So your pregnancy test runs on ELISA equipment. The PSA, which is the only other commonly used blood test as a primary screen for any cancer, the PSA, that runs on standard ELISA equipment. So we're using old equipment that's already installed in virtually every lab and every hospital around the globe. So that reduces our cost of goods. Also, we're looking for mutations to cell debris that's in circulation. We only require a tiny drop of blood. We only require 10 microliters of blood per biomarker assay to identify. So it keeps our cost of goods really low, which is different from a lot of our competitors. There are a lot of our competitors out there doing DNA sequencing and circulating tumor cells and things of that nature. But by definition, a lot of those companies are developing very expensive tests, so in the thousands of dollars in many cases. They can't run on standard equipment, so they have to run on fairly advanced and complicated equipment, which means the hospitals may or may not have that equipment installed already. So a lot of our competitors are not providing a simple solution for cancer screening. We are.
You just hit on a question I was going to have. You say your cost of goods is approximately $8. So I wanted to know, is the implementation strategy once you start going into commercialization, it sounds like you're using most of the equipment that the hospitals already have. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so that's the beauty of our test is we're low cost, we're accurate, we're detecting cancer early stage, and we require only a tiny drop of blood. So our blood test can be conducted during your annual physical. When you go in once a year to your doctor's office and your doctor gives you a form to fill out and says go off to the lab, to Quest or LabCorp or whatever your local lab is, and they tick all these boxes and run all these blood tests, they can just tick another box for, say if we call our blood test NuQ colorectal or NuQ pancreatic, they could just tick another box on your sheet when you go to have your blood work done, and they can just add our blood test onto your annual blood work. So that's really the beauty of our test.
And where was this developed, and who helped develop it?
The technology came out of Europe, and the science came out of Europe, and it was two distinct lines of research. One being done by a company called Chroma Therapeutics in the UK, and they had discovered that there are mutations that occur to your cells when cancer is developing in that particular area, and they documented in tissue what several of those mutations, and they filed a patent in Europe also. And there was another line of research being conducted at the University of Bonn in Germany by a professor named Dr. Stefan Holdenreiter, who's now an advisor to Volition, and he conducted an enormous amount of research documenting that when a person has cancer, cancer is by definition uncontrolled cell division, and all of our cells have a finite life, and so when you have uncontrolled cell division or cell birth, by definition you have elevated levels of cell death because you just have more cells being born, being created each day. And he discovered that when a person has cancer, because of the elevated levels of cell birth and cell death, the body can't metabolize all of the cell detritus or cell debris locally. So some of the cell debris ends up in circulation. So our chief scientist was aware of these two lines of research, Dr. Jake McAuliffe, and he brought the two lines of research together. So he licensed in the original patent from Chroma Therapeutics, which we now acquired outright about a year and a half ago. And he kind of married up the research being done at the University of Bonn and thought, well, if we know in tissue what some of the specific mutations are that are specific to particular cancers, and we know that some of that cell debris is in circulation in the blood, perhaps we have a diagnostic. The big question that Jake had was, well, do the cell debris and do those attendant mutations, do they remain intact once they enter circulation in the blood, or do they very, very quickly degrade? If they very quickly degrade, then you don't have a useful diagnostic because then you can't identify and see those mutations. So we ran some early trials. To his surprise, I think to everyone's surprise, the cell debris, they're called nucleosomes. They're individual component parts of chromosomes. To his surprise, those mononucleosomes remain perfectly intact in circulation, and those mutations are very identifiable. So we ran some early trials with some high accuracy, and we've moved on now to much larger trials, and we're demonstrating now over 90% accuracy in three cancers, in three clinical trials, colorectal, pancreatic, and lung.
So I also now want to ask about the IP portfolio, because it sounds like something where what's stopping the competition from coming in and doing it themselves and doing it as inexpensively as you are, so it sounds like you just said that you bought the patent outright, but what else do you have protecting it so that the competition can't infringe on what you're developing right now?
We have numerous patents granted globally, so we have a number of patents granted in Asia and Europe. In the past 9 months, we were granted our first 3 U.S. patents, including one very key cornerstone patent. And we have filed a number of other patents with the U.S. Patent Office. We expect other patents to be granted, and our chief scientist, Jake, is filing a number of new patents as well. So we have very good patent protection both in the U.S. and globally. And also, we also have years and years we're also years and years ahead of a lot of competitors, so even if someone were able to pierce our patents, and we don't think that that's likely, but even if they were, they would still have to find blood samples, run clinical trials. Those are expensive, they're very time-consuming. It would take them years, even if they were to pierce our patents, it would take them years and years and years to run the same clinical trials. We've had 6 years now of being able to look at the science, file patents, run clinical trials, and we're moving into commercialization now, so we'll have a first mover advantage. As I mentioned, we expect to commercialize our first product, a blood test for colorectal cancer in Europe this year and in the US next year.
Just to wrap up here real quick, and you've hit on a few of these points already, but just so that we have it all clear, from what you can tell me, what are some of the goals and milestones for the company moving ahead for the rest of the year and moving into 2017?
Sure. Thanks, Bobby. Well, I mean, as a diagnostics company, we have a lot of really important milestones coming this year and in early next year. One very important milestone coming in the next few months will be the completion of our 4,800 patient retrospective trial in colorectal cancer that we're running in Denmark at the University of Copenhagen. That'll be the largest clinical trial that the company has ever completed. So a major milestone. 4,800 patients. We are wrapping up the analysis over the next few months, and not only will that be the largest clinical trial that we've ever completed, it'll also be one of the largest clinical trials ever completed in colorectal cancer anywhere. So a very important milestone. We are very hopeful that we can demonstrate the same sensitivity and specificity, that is, the same accuracy, and minimize our false positives that we've been demonstrating in our recent clinical trials. And of course, that data will help us with reimbursement in Europe. We already have three of our biomarker assays CE marked in Europe, so we're well on the path to commercialization. That's our second milestone this year. We expect to launch our blood test for colorectal cancer in Europe this year. As I mentioned, we've CE marked 3 biomarker assays. Our test will be comprised of a panel of between most likely 4 and 6 biomarkers. So we've CE marked the first 3. Once we identify the final markers that'll make it into the panel, we'll CE mark those, and then we expect to launch by the end of this year. So again, a major milestone. That'll be our first ever commercial product. So again, a major milestone for us this year. We hope to launch in the US next year through 510K clearance with the FDA. And then we hope to launch our second product, which we expect will be a blood test for pancreatic cancer, which we think is very much needed out there because pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, is so poorly diagnosed. But we hope to launch that in Europe next year. We just announced a large clinical trial, 750 patient trial in Europe a few weeks ago. That should be completed by the end of this year. That should be enough for CE marking in Europe and a launch early next year for pancreatic cancer for our second blood test. And then we hope to be able to launch that pancreatic blood test in the US at the end of 17 or maybe in early 18, again through a 510K clearance through the FDA. So we have large clinical trials wrapping up this year, commercialization of our first product this year, and again, continued launch of products next year in the US and Europe. And we're just really, really excited about what the next 12 to 16 months holds for VolitionRx.
And where can our audience go and find more information about the company?
You can look at our website, which is www.VolitionRx.com. And again, our ticker symbol is VNRX on the NYSE MKT.
My name is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're here at the 2016 Marcum MicroCap Conference in New York City, New York. With me again has been Scott Powell from VolitionRx. The symbol is VNRX. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.